Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us tonight for Lifetime's Q&A session for hopeful adoptive parents. I'm Kim King, and I'm here with Heather Featherston, and we're excited to spend this time together with you discussing the adoption questions that are on your minds. If you are new to Lifetime, please be sure to reach out and connect with us if you haven't already done so. You can fill out the free application on our site. It's at LifetimeAdoption.com. Easy to apply. It takes about 15 minutes to complete the application. It's a pretty streamlined application. You'll notice it's not really in-depth like a home study application. We're getting an idea of what you are looking for in your adoption, just a couple basic preference questions, and several questions where you get the opportunity to share about yourself with us, so we can take a look at everything as a whole and get feedback to you, let you know if we can explore further. Maybe from there, set up a phone or video conference to learn more about your complete adoption preferences and guide you through establishing those, knowing that families come to us at all different stages on the path to growing their families. We hear from families who are just beginning to think about adoption, maybe are trying to conceive, maybe have just learned that they may be encountering infertility, or perhaps they're further down the path and have a home study ready and are looking for an agency to partner with, kind of doing their research. Or maybe they've already been waiting with a small local agency and are looking to expand. Families can be anywhere along those lines, or maybe something I haven't even thought of or mentioned, but I just want you to know that no matter where you are in your process, it is a-okay with us if you apply. That way we can help and guide you to the next step, next step, next step to get you to where you need to be, which is with your baby in your arms. So that is at LifetimeAdoption.com. And of course, be sure that you are tuning in on social media. We are on Instagram, Facebook. We share lots of great information there. If you're beginning to learn about Lifetime, wanting to get to know us better, first of all, tonight is a great step. You're here live on the webinar or making the priority to listen to the webinar recording, which is awesome. So that's great. And you can also engage with us on social media and get to know us better that way. We have a wonderful blog that covers tons of topics. You can even, query by topic and dive deep into the topic that most interests you about adoption. Now, here at Lifetime, we are private domestic adoption, which means that these are all birth moms who are choosing adoption voluntarily for their baby, usually a newborn. About 95-98% of our adoptions are newborn, and it's all within the U.S. So we are not working with international adoption. We are not working within the foster system. These are all voluntary relinquishments in the U.S. So we are nationwide. We're a licensed child placing agency in the state of Florida. And when you apply, we'll let you know about our ability to work with you depending on everything you share with us and the state that you're in. So Heather, with all that taken care of so families kind of understand a little bit about us, thank you for being here for our Q&A.
I'm happy to be here. I love these calls because we don't always know what we're going to talk about, but it's always a great time just to share, because I know a lot of times when we're thinking about something like adoption, it's a big decision. So it can be a really nice time just to be able to, get on with people who know about adoption like you and I, and prospective parents can just ask questions, ask what's on their mind, and we're happy to give this time together.
And I really love being that live person for people where I know how it feels trying to Google and get answers and get the whole picture. And sometimes, especially with adoption, you come across information that contradicts itself. And
Right.
the deeper you research into adoption, the more contradicting it becomes almost.
Yeah.
So actually having a conversation with someone who can put things into perspective and say, well, those certain things that you learned about adoption really don't apply to private adoption. That's more for fostering or
Right.
fostering to adopt. So I love being that person that can actually engage and go deeper and, answer those follow-up questions that families will naturally have. I always think having a live person is so much easier than Google, as wonderful as Google has been.
Right. Right.
And we've received a lot of questions from our registration, so we're going to make sure we get to those in just a moment. I want to let you know that Lifetime continues to provide webinars once you've already started your program. So when you become a Lifetime family, we have twice a month exclusive webinars just for our contracted families, where we can really talk about what's going on behind the scenes here at Lifetime and give you that ongoing education and support so that when you get the call, you are so prepared, even though, of course, you're going to have a big adrenaline rush. It's going to be a shock no matter when it happens. Everyone's always surprised to get that call, even though that's what this is all about, that moment when you get that call, right? It
Mm-hmm.
changes everything. But those webinars are so helpful to staying prepared, ready, and encouraged, not feeling alone on your adoption path. And I just want to let you know that you are not alone on this path to adoption. And God knows where you are with everything and knows your story and has a plan for you. So just keep that in your heart and be encouraged that you are on the right track to the child that God has for you. And it's just important to keep taking steps forward, such as getting questions answered. So let's go ahead here, Heather. So how long does the process take? Anisha asked.
Well, that is a big question right there. How long does the
Diving
process?
right in.
Um, as Kim said, the first step is always the application, which is free and online, takes about 15 minutes. From there, there's a lot of steps between that initial application and being shown to birth mothers, and that really depends on how fast a family moves through the process, which can include any number of. We usually then schedule a one-on-one call with you and a adoption coordinator to learn more about you, ask clarifying questions we have, answer questions you have. Once a family decides to move forward with Lifetime, we have a couple different options, kind of depending on their they want to get started right away, or if they want to engage in a more of a payment plan type of opportunity. And the home study is usually done once families are started with Lifetime. That has a time frame aspect to it, which depends on how quickly families are able to get their background checks done, get their medical forms completed. But once all the preliminary stuff, which can take up to about 6 months to complete, is ready, then you can begin being shown to birth mothers. We have one family, a Lifetime family right now, that they started with Lifetime about 2 months ago, and they're already matched with a birth mother. It Once you're ready to go, it can happen very quickly, but there are a few things that determine that. Number one is your adoption preferences, meaning the age, the race, the uh, the the other aspects of 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 the child that you're open to adopting. If the child has been exposed to prenatal drug use or cigarette use, um, those types of characteristics that you're open to considering, along with, say, your budget for birth mother expenses, that will determine the number of times that Lifetime's able to show you to a birth mother. So families who have very open preferences are shown more often than families who have more narrow preferences. So that that begins to happen. And then really what we're waiting on is for a birth mother to choose you. Now, like I mentioned, this family that just recently matched, that they got chosen right away. They had more open preferences, and then there's some characteristics of families that simply get chosen quicker. One is families who are multiracial themselves. Um, there are fewer of those adopting, so often that can go faster. It often cannot too. It just really depends. So, like I say, up to that point, you're really waiting for a birth mother to choose you. And it can happen quickly, it can happen further out. What Lifetime does is we work with you to develop your photos, the information about you, to try to help you develop your presentation materials based on the true reflection of who you are, contrasted with what birth mothers are looking for. Sometimes, for instance, during COVID, birth mothers seemed to, we got an uptick in birth mothers who were really focused on health conscious families because they wanted to ensure that if a parent, contracted COVID, they would be someone who would survive. You think back to those early days of COVID is really what I'm talking about. So, we try to, when we start seeing trends, we incorporate those into our program as we work with you on your presentation materials. So time frame, you'll notice I got through all this. We say, that there's an average, but it really is dependent on that birth mother choosing you. And there are things you can do to help make that happen more quickly.
Yes, and I think as far as how to plan your life, do we work with families that we expect to take 5 years? No, we
No.
don't. I think with international or fostering to adopt, 5 years is quite possible if you
Hmm.
stay the course, right? With our program, many families adopt within a year or two. That would all be quite normal
Hmm.
and nothing wrong with the family if they need a little more time than that.
Right.
So yes, there are many steps to the process. There are many factors as far as getting chosen sooner or later, but it's also all in God's perfect timing. So
Hmm.
we truly believe that here at Lifetime and do our best to enable that pathway for you to receive God's blessing. And we also have found how valuable the partnership is with our adoptive parents. As you go through every step, we're right there with you, partnering with you and guiding you along. So you're never on your own with this. And I just want to let you know that it is all in God's perfect timing.
Hmm.
So as long as you keep following the steps, you will be prepared to receive the blessing that God has for you. If you don't, you won't. It's as simple as that. So that is why it's just so good to spend this time prioritizing your adoption education, getting to know an agency on a deeper level, having these
Hmm.
conversations. Whether your conversations with us are phone, text, or email, that's great. That's all great. We do the same with our birth moms that are reaching out and keeping in touch with us. We love communication. So we just want to help you keep that conversation and that adoption momentum going. I think momentum is key in making sure
Hmm.
you're always doing things, whether it is something toward your home study, or maybe it's listening to a webinar or doing something for your own mental health now that your whole adoption checklist is checked off and you're just waiting to be chosen. Forward
Hmm.
momentum is always so important.
Right.
So we have some other questions coming in live. So I know we have several to answer too from the registration, but I also want to remind you, if you're just joining in, to please fill out your application if you haven't already done so. So that way we can get to know you better and just kind of put a face with the name, understand a little bit more about your story, and really tailor fit the guidance to what you share with us as your needs, timeline, and everything. So that's
Hmm.
at lifetimeadoption.com, where you can fill out the free application for adoptive parents. If you want the specific link, it's at lifetimeadoption.com/apply. And I love that people are actively putting in their questions here live as they're listening. So let's see, is there a limit to how long the family stays on the list if a birth mother doesn't choose them? And this is from Susan. And that is a great question, because Lifetime's intention in our heart is to help a family be successful, to actually see you with your baby in your arms. But there are definitely things we need in place from families for that to even be possible. So what we do with families is we have a partnership. We guide you through how to be successful. There are things we do require. It's not just a strong suggestion, but you need to have your home study current at all times while you're with us. That means background checks and physicals are always under a year old. That is Lifetime standard, and it's no big secret. All families with Lifetime know that. It also is essential to not pass on birth moms within all of your stated preferences, meaning this is a healthy baby within the race, age, and everything you've chosen in your adoption preferences, and birth mom chose you, and hopefully you were able to say yes. But if you weren't, then we don't keep working beyond our contractual agreement. But for families who are in good standing, we
Mhm.
do. And there are a few other factors
Mhm.
that we look at as to continuing our partnership beyond our commitment. To continue that partnership with families. If this sounds confusing, just ask us more about
Right.
this. You can email me, Kim@LifetimeAdoption.com, and I can give you all the details so that you
Mhm.
can have that and
Mhm.
reflect on that and ask follow-up questions. Oh, Leslie, that's so sweet. Thank you for all the encouragement. You are most welcome. And actually, when I was talking about how God has not forgotten you and your story, that came directly from one of our team members here. So she had that on her heart. She wanted me to pass that along to you. So I'm glad that you clued in on that.
You know,
Leslie, thank you for your question. Yes, go
yeah,
ahead, Heather.
I was just going to say, Leslie had a great question here that we actually haven't talked
Mhm.
about in a while, which is
Yeah.
what is the role of adoption consultants as Lifetime sees them? And
Mhm.
I love talking about this because um, I'll answer it first. Families who work with Lifetime don't use adoption consultants. It's not needed because Lifetime works very differently. Adoption consultants do not work directly with birth parents. They don't. In fact, that's the definition of a consultant. They um, they do. They all work a little differently. They do offer different services, have different requirements for add-ons or different things. Lifetime, we do not, as an agency, we don't work with any adoption consultants at this time. We work with our families directly, and we work with birth parents directly. So, for instance, when we're talking, I mentioned earlier about helping you with your profile, your presentation material, your Dear Birth Mother letter. There's a lot of different words for that. Our feedback is not based on what we think is great independently. It's based on birth parent feedback, and that birth parent feedback stems on our founders, start with Lifetime now almost 40 years ago. Um, there are things that women think about and consider and cause them worry while they're considering families, choosing a family for their baby, and those things are all built into our program based on our experience working with birth mothers. So I just wanted to share that. I'll tell you personally, I think that adoption consultants they may be fine for some people. I believe they tend to kind of drive up the cost of adoption because they're just simply not something that is needed, and often adoptions through consultants are the ones that are riskier and more expensive. My
I think,
personal opinion.
Heather, over the years, as consultants have emerged, maybe in the last 10 years or
Hmm.
so, um, they are someone that I have referred families to if our program isn't the right fit because they have some specific adoption needs that are very narrow and
Hmm.
restrictive, such as maybe they only want to adopt a baby girl who is Caucasian.
Hmm. Hmm.
So, our program really isn't geared toward that. Now, we work with families to kind of try to address, well, where is this coming from? And do you feel you can broaden beyond that vision and, allow God to bring you that child that He has for you, even beyond what a biological child would have been? Because with adoption, it opens the scope to so many more possibilities.
Hmm.
Sometimes people specify gender because feel it's an option since they're adopting, but it's not actually a normal thing in adoption. However, for some families, the reason they're adopting is to obtain a child of a specific gender, boy or girl, right? So I would guide that type of family to a consultant because then they can kind of pick and choose from those very specific questions, but or preferences. But I think a big problem with that is that, you know, they're going to need to have a big budget. Not only are they
Right.
going to pay an extra fee that isn't actually necessary in adoption just to have a consultant, but they're also really financially at risk if it doesn't work out with
Right.
an adoption that a consultant connects them to, and they may not wish to continue on with that specific agency the consultant connected them to for a specific case with a birth mom. I hope this is all making sense. I know, Heather, we've been talking about adoption for years, and there's a lot of jargon that we kind of take for granted, but please feel free to ask follow-up questions or just call in, to have a conversation with us. Call, text, or email us. Our phone number here is 727-493-0933, and we're happy to speak with you. If you don't have a coordinator already, just say, hey, I'm an inquiring family, and I just had some questions about the process and maybe lifetime adoption. So I appreciate that. That's a great question as you navigate what is the best fit for you and what's the best partner for you. I think here at Lifetime, partnership is definitely a pillar here. And we also work a lot with open adoption, and there's a question in our registration that asks about the difference between open and closed adoption. And I'm going to cut to the chase here and say what I always say at the end, but I'm going to say it at the beginning. There is a really great webinar that Heather adapted from one of her trainings that she does for our outreach. It's a webinar called Modern Christian Adoption, and I loved the way, Heather, that you adapted this training from an outreach training to adoptive parent training, because so many of the same old beliefs, fears, and concerns about birth moms really are true across the board, no matter who you are in the adoption world. So you can find that webinar on adoptionwebinar.com, or you can just email me and ask, or if we're texting already, you can just ask for the link. The webinar is called Modern Christian Adoption. So, but what's the basic difference between open and closed adoption, Heather?
Well, I think most people think it has to do with that contact. Do you have contact after the adoption or not? And certainly that's a part of it. But the short version is open adoption allows the birth mother, sometimes the birth parents, but typically the birth mother, to make the choices. She can choose the family, which in choosing the family, she's making a lot of choices. She's choosing, the race of the family, where they live, what they look like, what their interests are. So making that choice of family is also kind of about getting to know them. She can choose to have contact in the future and have a say in what that contact looks like. In fact, that's one of the things we ask when women call us is, what type of contact are you hoping for in the future? The norm with open adoption is really evolving as our communication evolves. And now it really is more about staying in touch via text message, getting together for a visit once a year. It really is kind of at the contact is a direct result of the relationship that the birth mother and adoptive parents have built. And I know that sounds scary when we're talking about building a relationship with somebody you don't know, but often a birth mother chooses a family that she sees some familiarity in, that there's something that, and this is what they've told us, they just look familiar. I feel like I already know them, or after they've talked, it's like, oh my gosh, it's like we talked for 2 hours. It's like we had so much in common. It's like I've always known them. And the family feels the same. Often families go into this a little hesitant, a little nervous, but then they talk to a birth mother who's chosen them, and it's like, oh, we had no idea adoption could be like this. In fact, that's the most common quote we hear from families and birth moms. So that communication in the future is a product of that relationship that is built. And even families who are very, very hesitant often come out on the other side hoping for more contact than the birth mother wants. It's just such a beautiful shift that happens. And really then the third thing is also the birth mother has choices of what happens at the hospital. She can choose who cuts the cord. She can hold and see her baby. She can do those things. Really to kind of round out, she makes the choices. And that is truly what open adoption is. Sometimes people want to try to put adoption in 3 boxes: open, semi-open, and closed. But it really isn't anymore. It's just on this continuum, and it may move and shift with time. For instance, a family, a birth mother that may have a lot of contact in the first few years, maybe birth mother meets a really good guy and they get married and they start having their own family. That contact may shift and become less, and that's okay. Often that happens because she knows she's been accepted by the family. She knows the family genuinely cares about her. So she feels that freedom to be able to move on with her life, knowing and trusting that when she wants to get in touch, she knows she will, because it's almost more like extended family relationship.
hmm Heather, I think that when I speak with families, what's on their hearts that keeps them from being like, sure, we'll do open adoption, is that they don't want to confuse the child.
Mhm.
They wonder like how much access the birth mom will have, and will it be like she can come by the house anytime? But really, it's not like that. There is a basic expectation or a baseline that is generally set when you work with Lifetime, such
Mhm.
as, are you willing to send her updates twice a year, like some
Mhm.
photos and a paragraph? Are you willing to have a meetup in a public place as long as things are positive with birth mom? Meet up once a year as long as she's responsible for her own travel, you
Mhm.
know? So kind of like just a get together once a year, very casual.
Mhm.
Now, whenever we talk about these things, families have lots of questions that they want to ask about this. And I'm happy to speak with you more on open adoption. In fact, I even have some resources that I can
Mhm.
email right over to you. So you can request the webinar link to Modern Christian Adoption. You can request the info on how much does adoption cost. You can request the information on open adoption. Just email me, kim@lifetimeadoption.com, or reply to any email
Mhm.
from Lifetime that you
Mhm.
already have, or text, and just let us know your question and what type of information you are looking for. Heather, this half hour is flying by so fast.
Mhm.
I feel like we need like two or three of these just to get all of these questions answered. I know we have plans for some upcoming webinars. I think
Mhm.
maybe it's time to fit in a Q&A about open adoption too. I just really know how I can't stress how important it is for you as adoptive parents to put the time in to learning about open adoption, because the most important reason is because it benefits the child. There are
Mhm.
actual studies now, after 30, 40 years of open adoption now becoming the norm. Um, Studies show that it is in the child's best interest. I think, Heather, back in the day, in the 80s, open adoption was a new thing that people started to actually be guided through in a more formal
Mhm.
way through an agency.
Mhm.
And, it was because for the birth mom's sake, right? So she could
Mhm.
always know that she made the right choice, that how at peace they felt knowing that a family is willing to keep in touch with them and never having to wonder, where is my baby? Is my baby okay? Is my baby growing up with the life I wanted them to have? That was the beginning of open
Mhm.
adoption. But now we see the benefits to the child, to their mental health, not having to carry the burden of who is my birth mom and all these unanswered questions, and having to decide, will I one day want to meet my birth mom? And if I do, will that even be possible by the time that I feel comfortable with wanting that, instead of adoptive parents taking on the role of driving that relationship and keeping that relationship amongst the adults with the child present, of course,
Mhm.
but that you are carrying that relationship versus the child having that as a burden. And not only that, but people over the years have encountered reasons why they need medical information. So there are just so many benefits to the child that nowadays it's just the norm for open adoption. I mean, just such an important thing to invest your time in, and keep your heart open. Bring your fears and worries and questions out into the light so we can address those for you and you can make an informed decision. The bottom line with open adoption is closed adoptions are only like 5% and dwindling in the US. So it's
Definitely.
very, very important. People are on the same page when it comes to open adoption.
Mhm.
Now, I recognize you might be new to this conversation. Maybe your spouse hasn't really even joined the conversation yet, and your spouse is like, I could never do that. Not after all this. It feels like I'm never going to have my own baby, or I just want to protect the family, and that feels like
Mhm.
leaving ourselves vulnerable, right?
Mhm.
But do the work, do the
Right.
hard work, and do the research, and that will really be so valuable as you parent through open adoption,
Yeah.
hopefully.
Yeah.
Well, that is,
Kim,
I appreciate all of you being here. Heather, yes.
I was just going to say before we wrap up, I know we had a couple of questions we didn't get to about the
Mhm.
financial aspect, and I know families
Sure.
can email you and talk about that. But before we close, could you quickly just give out the page on our website that talks about
Mhm.
financing?
Yes, how to fund adoption. You can go to lifetimeadoption.com/financing. There's lots of information there about how to use credit, how to apply for financing, how to do fundraisers, different grants that perhaps
Mhm.
you can think about applying for, and the federal adoption tax credit, which is really good. It's gotten so good, Heather.
Mhm.
So just learn about that. And there is also a webinar on there that you can watch. I think it's like 30 minutes or so
Mhm.
that talks all about a funding strategy that has been most successful for families.
Mhm.
And for specifics on anything or to talk about this one-on-one, feel free to reach out. You can call, text, or email with any questions you have. I will say it's super helpful if when you reach out, you share your first and last name, email address, if we don't already have it, and what state you're in, I think is very important. So that way
Definitely.
we can make sure the information is relevant to you, because we are nationwide. We've completed adoptions in every state across the nation, and we're very well aware of different things that impact families depending on what state you're in.
Mhm.
And we always adhere to any state laws that pertain to our adoption so that your adoption can be not only successful, but safe and secure for a lifetime.
Mhm.
So we're here for you. I appreciate you taking this time. Great questions. I appreciate the conversation, and feel free to reach out. Don't leave your questions unanswered. If you're brand new to Lifetime, fill out your application. It's at lifetimeadoption.com/apply, and we will see you on the next one.
Bye.